Hey guys, for Legion, Season 1, Episode 2, Chapter 2, and I was obviously very much looking forward to this episode because last week's premiere, was one of the best starts to a show I've seen in quite a long time. It was so confident, it was so mind-boggling, and it just hooks you in. That's what I loved about last week's premiere, is how much it just hooked you in to the show. Even though we had no idea what was going on, they did such a great job with hooking us into the story and wanting us to know more and more, and that's the perfect way to start a show. And I've heard so many people say, oh, the show's too confusing. The show doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to make sense. And that's why I really love about the show. They're doing a very good job with that. And this episode was definitely a bit more normal than the first one because we did have more of an idea what's going on. But we still don't really know what's going on. I'll say that. And I'm happy that they're going in this direction. I really am loving the show so far. I do think that episode 1 was stronger. There were definitely some things about this episode that I wasn't as big as a fan of. But I still really did love this episode. This was a great episode. I'm really loving the show. It's currently the first great, in my opinion, the first really great new show of 2017. There haven't really been that many great ones, and I think this one definitely is one. So let's just get in this episode, talk about everything that happened, and we start off, and I don't know if every episode of the show is going to start off with a montage, but that's something that Noah Hawley does a lot. He likes to start his shows like movies, and I really do appreciate him for doing that. Just the scene in general, it looked like a movie. It was incredible the way this was done. Just like last week where we had that 4-minute montage of David being born, from literally the moment he was born to now was pretty crazy to see. This wasn't as, crazy as that, but basically we see David, Sid, and the rest of the rescue party are on the road to nowhere. According to the instrumental version of the Talking Head song playing softly in the background, and they're being followed by the Eye, who is the silent man who is in on David's interrogation. I'm guessing he's going to be the villain, and his government commandos and their attack dogs. So that's the basic thing going on in this episode. They're trying to get away from them, and the road actually leads them to Summerland, which is a compound that is full of other mutants, and we get more insight into two characters, Melanie Bird and into Potomi, because we didn't know anything about these two characters. We met them in the end of last week, and I really am loving where they're going with these two characters. That being said, though, in this episode, Melanie Bird, in my opinion, is nothing more than just someone who's there to explain things, and someone's there to help David, and I'm hoping that's not the case, but this episode, she just kind of seemed like she was there to give exposition. That's just kind of how I felt. I'm sure she's not just there to do that, but just this episode, I kind of felt the way. But Bird gives David a quick briefing on what's going on. She believes he's a very powerful telepath, potentially telekinetic, and that his mental illness, voice in his head, are just part of his powers. And you can really see David start to go insane because of this. All his life, he's thought he's had a mental illness, and now he's starting to realize that, no, that was just a part of his powers, the side effect of what he really is, and seeing David realizing what he's really becoming is astounding to watch, and Dan Stevens is absolutely nailing the character. I'm hearing people say he's going way too over the top, and I think it's the perfect amount of, over the top he's going. I think he did a very good job with that, and his reaction here was definitely one of the strongest parts of this episode, is him just learning more about his powers. So we find that the divisions were created by the government to track and control people like David and Sydney, and it's unclear how much of this David actually takes in, because he's in extreme pain. He's shaking uncontrollably in bed, so you don't actually know if David's actually, able to listen to all this, or if this is just really, this is weighing on him greatly, and the voices are overwhelming him. They're more powerful at Summerland, and Melanie tries to focus him by telling him that the one voice calling to him and to turn down and try to turn down all the others, because there's so many voices going on at once. And we had that scene last week where he was telling everyone to shut up because there's just so many voices, corrupting his mind, and he succeeds, and the pain actually disappears, and she then tells him to get some sleep. Tomorrow they start on memory work, and the next day they're taking a walk through the woods. She explains that every memory has a mental illness was actually his power, and she offers to show him and takes him to a glass room in the middle of the woods, and Sid and Potomi are there waiting, and basically Melanie, Potomi, and David sit at a round table, metal grips all around. They're gonna look back and see what triggers his powers, what really is the thing that made him have these powers, because up till now, he's thought that he just had a mental illness. He never realized he actually had these powers, so they really do want to try to figure out, okay, what really gets him, have these powers. So the three of them hold the grips, and they concentrate, and they're in a field watching young David and his sister play with their dog at seemingly much happier times. You know, we've seen before that David did have quite a good childhood. He had a very good relation with his mother. Him and Amy were quite close. I mean, he definitely did have somewhat of a very good childhood. Even though he might not have the best life, his childhood seems pretty mundane. And Potomi is a memory artist. That is his gift, we find out, which I really am liking this character, Potomi. I'm already very interested in him, and according to Melanie right now, this is just about accepting that this is real. Then she will show him how this is his gift, not an illness, and this does make him whole. This is essentially, you know, what he's supposed to have. It's his gift. This is not something that he should think of as, you know, weakness. It's something he should use to his strengths, and they visit a couple other happy moments in David's childhood. David tells them about his dad, who is an astronomer who died last year and while he was in the hospital, and we see his dad reading young David a bedtime story. Just learning this information, it makes the scene that much stronger. You can see why David is so crazy and why he feels so alone, and we see David he's reading a bedtime story, a strange and Bertonisk story about a kid who chops off his mother's head, and David's weirded out by this and his memory starts shaking. We don't even know if David actually remembers what's actually going on here, which was very interesting to see. But in the room, he freaks out, he lets go of the grips, and he tries to escape the room. Remember, this is unlike anything David's ever done before. He's never really gone through something like this, and obviously it's a lot for him to handle. So Sid's trying to calm him down. Potomi uses powers to put him to sleep, and while asleep, he remembers speaking with Dr. Poole, and the scene's very glitchy, echoey, with many time jumps, which is just really weird overall. Almost every scene in this episode is like that, but again, it's not a style, it's more of David, himself. This is how his mind is. We're going into his mind and we're seeing how David is, and I think that style, it works very well here. It doesn't feel style over substance at all. It feels very much like this is what they want to do because this is how David really reacts to these things, and this is us getting in a look into David's mind. His mind is filled with madness and all these cerebral type things that it's just hard to control, and that's why the show feels so uncontrolled, because of how David himself is very much uncontrolled. So after the session, David meets Lenny outside, and we found a couple more things about Lenny in this episode, which I'll get into in a little bit, but we don't know. We find out actually why Lenny died in this episode, which we'll get into, but we do find out that Lenny actually is a lesbian. Like, she clearly does like girls, which is interesting to see, but he wakes up in a peaceful diorama, and Potomi sits over him offering some milk. Memory work apparently takes a lot out of you, which is understandable. I mean, it really is a lot to actually literally go into your own memory and have to relive all these things in your life. It really is a lot to do, and the milk, we find out, actually helps. So he tells David that Melanie thinks that David is the key to winning the war, and we don't know what that's about, but I think that definitely plays into whatever that guy was talking about with Sid last week. I think he definitely is kind of in the same thing as Melanie is. We don't really know what that's all about, but he's distracted by this glitchy, unclear shadow, and he shakes it off and focuses on Potomi, who's explaining that he remembers his own birth, and Potomi asked him about the book that his father was reading, which, that's crazy to think about. I mean, this guy literally can go back to his own birth. It is an insane power to have, but he asked him about the book that his father was reading, and David claims that he doesn't remember. He doesn't want to talk about it, and I don't think it's that David doesn't want to talk about it. I think he's freaked out by the vision. I mean, remember, the vision was him chopping off his mother's head, and I think David, he doesn't just see this as, a vision. He sees this as possibly a prophecy, and I kind of see it that way, too. I don't know if they're trying to say that David's going to have to kill his mother, but I kind of foresee that something like this is going to happen in the present time, and I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I think David definitely knows that something has to do with that, so we'll have to see. But that evening, Sid finds David outside on a swing set. She still doesn't really understand what happened when they switched places. This is a power that she has, and she's also very unaware. She doesn't really know what it all means, and there was a flash, and everything in the day room was so loud, and there was something else. She saw the Potato Demon Man. Now, this is when it happened that we find out that she actually killed Lenny, which she apologizes for, which I was shocked to hear about. But yes, Sid actually is the one that killed Lenny, and that's how Lenny died, is that Sid actually was the one who killed her, which is interesting to think about, but it does make sense. Lenny's been there as long as Sid has, so I don't know, but again, we don't know if that's actually true, if, Sid actually killed Lenny, or if, Sid killed Lenny in a vision. We don't know. Again, Lenny is remember, Sid is the power to switch bodies with people, so she might not even killed Lenny for all we know. So she apologized for it, and I thought that was definitely interesting to see. We find out that she was the one who killed Lenny. So Melanie heard it when Sydney used David's powers, and Division 3 heard it too. They came because they thought they heard him, but it was really Sid they wanted. You know, they thought that David was the one who killed Lenny, but it was really Sid, and that's why they took her away. Now, this makes sense as to why she was taken away last week, because they feel she was the one who actually killed Sid. So David desperately wants to hug her, realizing what she's gone through, and that she's basically gone through as much shit as he has, and even hold her gloved hand, but she shies away. And again, it's a very powerful scene, because I think Sid, she does want to be close to David, but at the same time, she's terrified of it, because anyone she seems to get close to, she ends up destroying. And I think Lenny and her, they had definitely a very interesting relationship. I think definitely something happened there, and I think she's very worried that something very bad is going to happen between her and David, and I don't know exactly what that's going to be, but I think definitely, you know, she's very worried about possibly hurting David even more than he already is. And I love in this scene that we see that even just being close to another human being, it makes her feel very uncomfortable. Not just, you know, she's not even touching him. She just feels uncomfortable being close to him. So he understands they're having a romance of the mind. And that's entirely the best way to put it. That is exactly what it is. It is entirely a romance of the mind, because they can't actually engage in any sort of physical contact. And it's crazy to think about, really, that, I mean, David, you know, he loves this girl, but he can't actually, you know, he can't kiss her. He can't show any affection towards her. He can do whatever he can, but he just can't show any sort of affection or anything like that. It was just very interesting to see. It's a very different type of romance, and I really am liking the way that they're writing it so far. So the next day, he's in an MRI machine. This crazy scientist, Carrie, not to be confused with his female assistant daughter, Carrie. So basically, because these two do have, the same first name and last name, I'm going to try not to confuse myself. So I'm going to call Carrie the father, Loudermilk, and when I talk about his daughter, I'll call her Carrie. Just so you guys know, because I know it is kind of confusing. Believe me, I was quite confused as well. I didn't know, like, I'm like, okay, I know this is Carrie, but this is Carrie. What do I really do here? So when we talk about Bill Irwin's character, you know, Carrie Loudermilk, I'm going to refer to him as, you know, Dr. Loudermilk. But when we refer to Carrie Loudermilk, his daughter, I'll just call her Carrie, just so you guys know. That's how I'll differentiate the two. Alright, but basically, he's fiddling with knobs, and he instructs David to think about someone he loves, and rather than thinking about Sydney, he thinks of his sister Amy. And we're taken back to the day after David's meeting with Dr. Poole. Amy confides that she thinks her boyfriend's going to propose, and I like that we got a little bit more into the character of Amy, because besides Sid, Amy's really been the only other person that David can really talk to, and Amy tries to convince him that he has a chance at a real life with Philly, the one who left him already. Now, we don't know who Philly is. We meet this girl here named Philly, and she clearly was someone who David had a genuine connection to, and someone who David definitely did have some sort of a relationship with. But obviously, you know, when you're as crazy as David is, you know, relationships aren't exactly that stable, and they're really not going to work out that well. So you can clearly understand very well why things probably did not work out well between David and Philly. We don't know much about it, but I do like the way they're setting that up. And suddenly it takes him back to immediately after the doctor's visit. He's with Lenny, and she has an oven, and they take to a local pusher and trade him for blue liquid, which is a new drug called Vapor, and they head back to Lenny's apartment, where she puts the drug in a giant fog diffuser. They lay down and enjoy the ride, but when David looks to Lenny, he sees the potato devil in her place, and this is now a memory that now David, Melanie, and Potomi are all viewing, which is very interesting to see. So David, yeah, you know, he's under that intuition that Sid was the one who killed Lenny. So now whenever he sees Lenny, he just sees the Potato Man, because that's the thing that, you know, told Sid to kill Lenny, is, you know, all he sees is the devil with the yellow eyes, which, you know, looks like a potato, but we're gonna call him the devil with the yellow eyes. It's like the proper name for him. So basically, Melanie wants to know what it is that David saw, insisting that the things he sees are real, and David deflects, and Potomi takes them back to the appointment with Dr. Poole. They see the glitches and the micro time jumps, and Melanie assures David it's okay to be confused, because, again, he really does not have the biggest grip on life, and Potomi then rewinds the scene, sees a flash of David in the kitchen using his powers, and he tells him to make up his mind blank. He says that he'll get them there. Next, they flash into David's childhood room. Potomi tries to move them around, but David David's just too strong. It's not gonna work. And David promises that he trusts them, but then the door slams shut, the creepy bedtime book falls to the floor, and young David looks terrified. So again, we don't know what this is all about. I think it definitely does have some sort of a connection to the man with the yellow eyes, but again, we'll have to see. And just these things, they give us so much great development with David, and I'm really loving the way they're doing that. And just in the little of instances, just little choices like that, I think are just extremely well done. And especially the motif with the creepy bedtime book, it really does show how much David has lived his life in fear up to this point. So then we get a scene with David and Sid talking quietly. She wants to know about his memory, but again deflects, and, you know, he can't explain to her because he doesn't know how to explain. It's not because he doesn't want to tell her, it's because he himself doesn't know how to explain it, which makes complete sense. We don't know either. So he hears her think that he'll protect her, but then apologizes that he can't control his power yet, because he can't. He doesn't know if he can really protect her. I think he wants to, but how is he, you know, he doesn't know how to use his powers to his advantage. He's just learned about them, and that's something I do like about the show, is how we're learning just as much as David does. Like, we're learning at the pace that he is, and I think the show's doing a very good job with that. So David's back in the MRI, and Loudermilk's trying to map his mind, figuring out where the memories are stored, and next Dave remembers more of his session with Dr. Poole. He talks about seeing another world out of the corner of his eye, and he looks at the stars with his dad, thinking that they were talking to him, and a door behind Dr. Poole creaks open a bit. David gets very panicky. He's freaking out at this point, and Poole goes to the door, shuts it, assuring his patient that there's nothing to worry about. We don't know what's going on there, but he comes back to the here and now in the MRI when he thinks he hears a woman say his name, and again, he thinks it is Amy, and Amy actually is down there. She's at Clockworks Hospital, she's trying to find David, and the receptionist is telling her they have no record of him ever being at the hospital. So you know something definitely very shady is going on. This hospital obviously is not a very safe place. This is infuriating her. You know, she knows that he's here. She's been there hundreds of times and thinks that this is all a prank, and the receptionist suggested they admit her for observation, and David tries to appear her in the hall, calling to him a mere shadow, but Amy sees him, hears him, and she actually walks to him, like she's about to go right to him, and Loudermilk is stunned. David's brains it up like he's never seen before, and you can see that he is in complete awe. Like, he has never seen David's brain lit up like this. He's never really seen someone have this kind of power, and you get the sense that Loudermilk is in as much wonder as David is. Like, he did not know what David was truly capable of, and I think it's definitely interesting the way we're seeing that. So he tells him he hurt his sister, and Loudermilk runs out. David is starting to get anxious. He tries to sit up. He hits his head. He tries to stay calm, and you can see again, he's just freaking out. He doesn't know what to do at this point. And he sees the devil with the yellow eyes, and down near his feet, he freaks out. Suddenly, he's out of the MRI. He's laying on the floor, which is completely empty, and the MRIs end up outside of the lawn, all in one piece, and everything in Summerland races out to check out the irregularity. Melanie just smiles a bit, and meanwhile, David has his bag packed and is in the elevator. Sid jumps in, mad that he's leaving, even if it is only for one day. She thinks that she's the reason that he's leaving, but David explains that he saw Amy, and he thinks Division 3 has her now. You know, he knows she's not safe, so Sydney begs him to stay a little bit longer, just long enough so he can learn what he needs to do, and she will help him. You can tell that she really does need him at this point. You know, she really doesn't have anyone else to talk to, and she says that, you know, rescue her like they rescued him. So finally she comes out with it bluntly. She says that she's bait and they won't kill her. So yeah, Amy is just there as bait. They've gotten her to lure David to them because, again, they need him for various reasons that we don't know. But he returns to Summerland, and then we get to the ending, which honestly was really fucking creepy, where she sits in the dark, dank room trying to maintain her composure. She's freaking out at this point. She has no idea what's going on, but the eye comes in, removed from a fish tank filled with tiny eels, and all he says is, "Shall we begin?" And that is the way this episode ends. Really great stuff overall, but let's just get into this episode and where we're going from here. So while this episode is definitely a bit slower than the first one, this still was a fantastic episode, and I really did love where we're going with the story. I think there's just a lot of interesting stuff going on here. Let's first talk about David and what's going on here with the eye, because we know, obviously, the eye wants him for something. We don't know what that's all about, but he was the one, you know, that was in charge of the whole interrogation thing going on with that guy who was not a police officer, but was kind of pretending to be a police officer. I think he's part of that shady operation. We don't know what that's about, but I think we're definitely getting the sense that the mental hospital that David's been staying at is not really a mental hospital. Like, he was there for another purpose, and it makes sense because, you know, Sid was there, so was Lenny, and it makes sense why these characters were there. Now, we know zero to nothing about Lenny at this point. We know she was killed, but we'll get into that. But I think definitely there's definitely more to that than we think, and I can't wait to see really where that's going to go. I thought that was definitely very interesting. And what he is playing with those eels, I mean, that freaked me out. I have no idea really what can happen here. The possibilities really are endless for what can happen to Amy, and she definitely is in grave danger. Like, this could end up really, really bad for her, and obviously David wants to save her, but as we know, David does not have the biggest grip on, one, reality, but also his powers. He doesn't understand them. Again, he didn't say to Sid, I can't tell you because I don't want to tell you. He can't tell her because he doesn't know how to explain it. He doesn't know where these came from. You know, he doesn't know the origin of anything, and I think it's just a really well done job of showing how intimate the show is, because this is a very intimate show so far, where it's really getting into the mind of David and his powers. They're doing an incredibly well job of that. I really am liking the way that that's going. But I'm also very interested in what's going on with David and Sid, because Sid's now told David that she's killed Lenny. You know, she told him that she killed him, that she killed her, but again, we don't know if that's actually true. We don't know if Lenny's actually dead. I'm willing to bet that Lenny has been dead for much longer. I think Sid thinks that she killed her, but I don't think Sid actually killed her. I think Lenny's been alone a lot longer than that. However, Sid's saying to David that that's the reason why she was taken, and I don't know if that's actually the case. I feel like there's definitely more to it. Now, do I think that Sid's lying to David? I don't think so. I think definitely she is telling the truth. I think she's telling him pretty much everything that she knows. I don't think she knows a lot. I think they haven't really told her a lot about what's really going on with her, and I think she basically knows as much about her powers as David does. She seems very unaware of, you know, what she's really capable of. You know, she doesn't understand how she's merging with people. That stuff feels very sincere. But her killing Lenny, I don't know if that's actually true. I don't know if she actually killed Lenny. We'll have to find out what happened there. I think that definitely is very interesting. But I think we're starting to get more of a reason why Lenny is with David and why Lenny did get close to David. I think Lenny's been through sort of the same sort of situation that David has. I think she definitely had some sort of power that, you know, kind of corrupted her mind. She knew how to deal with it, and I am assuming that Lenny killed herself. I want to say that. I think that Lenny killed herself. I don't think that Sid actually killed her. I think Sid thinks that she killed her, and I do think that Lenny died around that time, but I don't think that it was directly because of Sid. I think that Lenny probably took her own life. Like, that's kind of what I think. I think that that's the reason why she's there, as kind of like his guardian angel right now. I think that definitely is very interesting. I mentioned seeing where that whole relationship is going to go. But also, who is this other girl that Dave was talking about? Who is Philly? You know, we heard about Philly just randomly from Amy, and obviously things did not go well between Philly and David, but you could tell that David genuinely does care about his sister. It seems like the only other person that he cares about besides Sid is Amy. He has this very close connection with her. You know, she cares about her brother. She really wants to help him. But who's Philly? What kind of relationship did they have? And why did it end up so sour? I think we can, you know, we can pretty much guess why, because again, everyone's always thought David was insane. But again, we don't know what prompted him into the hospital. What got him to be checked into the mental facility? We don't know any of that stuff. You know, that's stuff that we're still very unknown with, and I like that. I like that the show hasn't told us a lot of what's going on there. But I also am liking how we can see all these characters are in complete awe of what's going on. They themselves don't really know about David's powers. They want to know things going on with them, but again, he just can't really tell them because he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't have a grip on reality. He doesn't have the best grip on himself, and I think that whole situation is just very interesting. There's so many places they can go with this story, and I'm really loving where they're going with it so far. And the characters we met here, Potomi particularly, I'm very intrigued by. The fact that he can relive even his own birth is insane to think about, but I definitely think we're going to see a lot more with him. I think he's going to become a lot more substantial into the show. At least I hope so, because at this point, my only complaint in this episode is that Potomi and Melanie, at least so far, just seem like they're here to explain things to David. You know, especially with Melanie. Melanie's explaining a lot of this world and what's really all about. And it's Jean Smart's great. I can watch Jean Smart, you know, for if this whole episode was just Jean Smart explaining things to David, she's such a great actress. I could watch an entire show of just that. Honestly, I could. But right now, it doesn't really seem like she has much else of a character. I'm sure she will, but this episode, she was just kind of there to explain things. But Tommy, on the other hand, I think is in basically just as clueless as David is when it comes to his powers. I think he knows the general idea of, you know, why David's here, but I think he knows nothing about his powers. It doesn't seem like anyone really knows much about David's powers, and I think that definitely is very interesting the way the show is doing that. It's a very unconventional way of telling an origin story. You know, most times an origin story, you have a group that's pretty well known, and they at least have a general idea of what David's powers really are, but they have no idea. Like, they have no idea whatsoever what's happening to David. They just know that what he's been through, you know, they're not, it's not schizophrenia. He's not schizophrenic. He is, in fact, has these powers. It's a side effect of his powers, and it's something he's had pretty much all his life, which is very interesting to think about. And again, we don't really know what that's all about. What is this war that Melanie's talking about? I think that definitely is very compelling. And the drawing, like I said, throughout the episode, we have this motif of the drawing. This drawing that, you know, the bedtime story that his father read to him that involved the hero chopping off his mother's head, and I think that definitely is going to connect to reality at some point. I think David, that's why it's really freaking him out. He's realizing what he has to do here. He's realizing he may have to become a killer. All things that David isn't really 100% okay with. He doesn't really know if he's willing to do all this. I think he's just, you know, all this information is just happening at once, which is crazy to think about. And again, on a lesser show, I'd say, okay, too much is happening. But on this show that's so mind-boggling and confusing, and like I said, so intimate, it probably is the most intimate origin story I've ever seen, to be honest. Like, at least so far, it's a very intimate story. I'm fine with the show being I'm crazy. I'm fine with the show being cerebral. I'm fine with the show, just being flat out crazy. I mean, it is. It's a crazy show. This is a show where, I mean, there's so many scenes throughout this episode. Just take the scene where he's talking to Lenny, and all of a sudden her voice just starts to get muffled, and she starts to talk in, you know, slow motion. I mean, it's weird. It really is. It's weird. Her voice is, like, all muffled and things like that. But on a lesser show, I would say that's just, you know, dumb, and it's very style over substance, but I wouldn't say that with this show. This show, it's making us feel how David does. I think our intrigue, our, you know, our disbelief, all of that, that's how David is feeling. He doesn't want to believe this is actually real. He doesn't want to believe he actually has these powers, but we know that he does. We know what David has really been tasked to do. We know that David obviously has these powers for a reason. I think it's just keeping us that much more intrigued. At least for me. I mean, I am very much intrigued into seeing where the story's going to go. I think there's a lot of aspects they've really opened up very, very well here, and I'm fine with the weird tone of the show. It's very eccentric, and I like it when a show is eccentric. That's something I really do credit Noah Hawley on, is that he's very confident with this show. Not many shows are this confident and this risky in their first season, and that's something that I will definitely give to Legion's credit, is that it is a very, very risky show that I think is going to turn some people off. However, I'm happy to see the show is already seeming to gain a following. I'm liking where the show is going so far. We know nothing about Loudermilk's daughter. She's just kind of here, by the way. Like, we don't really know much about her. I'm hoping we find out more about her. She is a main character, so I'm sure we'll find out more about Carrie as the show goes on. I think that definitely is interesting. Even why these two are both named Carrie Loudermilk, even that fascinates me. I don't know why. It fascinates me. I don't know why they're both named Carrie Loudermilk. Like, why did he name his daughter after him? It's kind of weird the way that happened, but we'll have to see really what's going to happen there. I think that's definitely very interesting. Who's the devil with the yellow eyes? Why is he following David? There's just so many things that the show can answer, and I can't wait to see where they're going to go. I don't want them to answer them too quickly. I love the disbelief that the show is in right now. I love the cerebral tone. I'm just really loving everything about this first episode. Like I said, despite the fact I felt Melanie Bird was just kind of here to be an exposition-heavy character, this is exposition we want to hear, and it didn't bother me that much, and it doesn't stop me from still giving this episode of Legion, Season 1, Episode 2, Chapter 2, a 4.5 out of 5, or an A-. So for guys, maybe this episode of Legion, let me know what you guys thought of this episode overall. Loved your thoughts on it. Are you liking this show? Do you like the weird tone where the show is going? What do you think is really going on? You know, what is the war that David is heading himself into? There's just so many questions as to where the show can go. I think this is going to be a show that has crazy fan theories, and I can't wait to see how that goes as well. I love seeing people talk about shows, you know, that have, you know, I love hearing people talk about fan theories. I just hope they don't end up becoming true like Westworld, because it did kind of lessen the impact, but it also didn't because it was very well done. But I'm getting sidetracked here at this point, guys. I'm just going on a tangent, and that's for this video. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for a movie review, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.